One of the things I definitely admire about you is you were very transparent in showing the journey that you were taking your teams on, with at the same time being sensitive to the client and so on and
Yeah.
so forth. And the level of detail some of your LinkedIn posts especially used to go to is like, wow, this can really make a difference. And here's an individual who can stand behind the work he's doing, which sometimes, the the ecosystem of LinkedIn, and especially in the Agile community, we can eat each other from the inside sometimes. So yeah, props to you for sort of standing behind and showing your workings out. Was that an easy thing to do, or is it something you just instinctively did because it was a good idea to prove this stuff works?
Yeah, I think, well, so yeah, it was instinctive. My mum always used to say that, like, when I was a kid, when we were getting on the bus, I'd just talk to all, everyone, all and sundry, and like I'd walk up to like old guys waiting for the bus and just chat to them and stuff like that. So there's an earnestness to it. And sometimes nowadays, now I'm a bit older, actually, in organisations, that can be it can be a pro and a con, that you feel at ease, sort of speaking your mind, maybe. But essentially, like in those early days of LinkedIn, which I live my life through LinkedIn, so that is my favourite form of social media. Whereas I think it is a bit more tempered than some of the other forms. There's an element of propriety and business culture to it. But I do get what you mean about people sort of rip each other apart on all of these things. But I was just, basically, with the blessing of the organisations that I was supporting at any given moment, sort of saying there's lessons to be learned here.
Yeah.
And I think so. I've been, you might call it like an autodidact. I've been someone who likes to learn things, but not in sort of the structure of an educational institution, which is why I didn't go on to higher education and so on. And like this was the act of doing that. So not only was I trying to share the things that I've been doing, in order to help people see that these things could be done and the usefulness of them, I was also, sometimes I'll quote the chap who wrote Passage to India, E.M. Forster, and he's got a lovely quote that's, how do I know what I think until I see what I say? So there was always an element of, I was running it past people, and I thought there's a massive audience there that can check me out, can go, yeah, well, actually, no, we won't get that from what you've just said, and I could get that feedback from it.
Yeah.
And I think because of the earnestness of it, how it came across, and what I was putting out there, actually, the responses were really lovely. The high percentage of niceness coming back. So
I think part of that is because of how accessible it was. Like I felt like, because you went through you were doing it quite consistently. I'm not saying you don't do it now, but you were showing those data points on a consistent basis, and it was easy for the reader to follow that journey in an accessible way because you were breaking it down. Where sometimes, cumulative flows and scatter plots are not that easy to understand, especially if you're coming into it quite fresh. So it was nice to see someone, like I said, showing those receipts of this is what I've done, this is what I've learned, and this is the proof of what the client is sort of seeing from it.
Yeah.
So you sort of died down with that sort of stuff. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. Sometimes it, some of these things are habitual, aren't they? Like the human nature thing is, if you're doing a lot of them, it's easy to put it out. And then, and as I sort of said, it does rely on the charitableness of the client, and how into it they are. And sometimes I've spent like longer periods of times at certain clients who are either less inclined to want to share that sort of stuff, or the work's started to change as well. So, there's an element of being a victim of your own success a little bit, I suppose, of then starting to get into more complex, more moving closer to the boardroom, having more influence, and then some of the conversations that you're trying to influence using agile approaches and so on, they can be a bit more sensitive. So I'm always looking for what are those nuggets at a team level that can really kickstart a team into being able to utilize these tools and principles and approaches and so on, and they get the quickest sort of feedback and the best response. I think
Yeah.
a lot of the other stuff ends up, and I do sort of post some of the other stuff, and it's less frequent, but it feels a bit more academic or theoretical when it's at that sort of level.
Yeah, that's fair. When you go into an organization and you start sort of talking about flow and Kanban, where do you start? Because I feel like with Scrum, it's quite a nice package of stuff. You start here, this is what it is, these are the events, this is what it's all about, this is the training that you go on, so on and so forth. Where does one begin with Kanban going into an organization?
Yeah, I mean, what I love about Scrum is that it gives you, so like you say, like the package, so you can introduce like a green field. You can wipe something clear and go, right, here's a green field, here's how we'll build it from the ground up. What I then love about Kanban is that it's really comfortable brownfield.
Yeah.
Like, so the whole sort of start with where you are now is that's really my in point, and you don't need a lot of cooperation really in this day and age. You don't need the upfront buy-in because there's ways and means of getting the buy-in by really holding up the mirror that Kanban can give you. And so what I'll usually do is I'll usually start with, there are always conversations about how a team feel they're performing. There's always some form of understanding about how everyone outside of the team feels they're performing. There's always that sort of, the word on the street is, or these are the grumblings from the other people, whatever. And what I usually do is go straight to the data. So everyone has a workflow tool. Not everyone uses it as a workflow tool. Usually it's just a system of record, and we dump ideas in there. And then so these very powerful tools will capture some data, and I usually bring it out and start plotting some of those graphs, and then start interpreting them in front of the people who, are doing the work, and sort of show them that, well, if I was to look at this data, which is, it's data you've captured, it's your data, it describes how you behave. This is how I'd interpret it. And often there's a big eye opener there. What it doesn't necessarily do in the first instances is show them actually how brilliant they are at doing things. What it usually shows is where tools are concerned, people don't really like them, and there's a lack of discipline in using them.
Yeah.
But if you can show people that gap, and you sort of say to them like, it's lucky I came along and pulled this out, because the CEO bought you this tool.
Yeah.
And the CEO can access it whenever they want. And she might look at it and go, well, this is all a load of rubbish. I don't need these people. But I'm showing you now how you can interpret it. And usually the first thing that happens in that conversation is, well, maybe we should be a bit more, true to, when we start a piece of work, we'll click start. When we stop a piece of work, we'll click stop. And then we'll really start to see how effective we are. And we'll also start to see where we might improve. So just that first behavioral change gets people interested in how data can represent them.
Yeah. So when you go into somewhere that may have tried implementing Kanban or certain aspects of it, where have they normally gone wrong? So what do I mean by that? So some people think Post-its on a board is Kanban. Like, when you go into somewhere to try and help unpick some of that snake's wedding, what are the common themes, if you like?
Yeah, so I think generally that's the first problem that people have, is that they think putting people on a board. I think actually no, it's more because they compare it to Scrum. So actually the big thing is usually sprint or no sprint.
Yeah,
sprint or sprintless. And so that's the confusion, when really what we're talking about is they're not too dissimilar. It's about time boxing, it's about trying to maintain focus. So what would probably usually happen is that misunderstanding of deferred commitment. Like there's a certain point in our workflow that we want to keep work behind. Have it can pile up there.
Yeah.
And then once it crosses that line where we as a team, as a delivery capability, say we're going to let that in, then we're going to fully commit to getting it through as quickly as possible. And I think people don't really understand that deferred commitment thing about keep it back there and then actually, you know, let stuff in as your whip limit dictates.
Yeah.
I think another thing as well people get hung up on is whip limits.
Mm.
That, you know, I would often talk to people about, well, they're levers. That what you're saying is you'll let work in or keep work out, and you can put that up and down based on what's happening around you. People will often think, oh no, it's a set limit and it's there forever. When really we're just trying to experiment with how we keep flow going